Thank you for joining us. Have you ever wondered why you enjoy the things you enjoy? Why you think the things you think and do the things you do? Why you are the person that you are? These are all questions that you ask frequently when studying psychology. As a psychology graduate, I've had a deep fascination with what makes us the people that we are today, and a large part of that is our sexualities and our sexual preferences. Today's video will take a slightly different turn. Instead of focusing on the psychology of a particular sexual kink or fetish, we will be addressing and exploring the difference between monogamy and polyamory, the history of the two, and how polyamory is understood from a psychological perspective. Before we can address or understand polyamory, it's important to fully understand the alternative, or in this case, what Western traditional society considers to be the norm. The vast majority of people in the modern generation, whether they know it or not, define themselves as monogamous, or at the very least they strive for a monogamous relationship, as society tends to push the agenda that traditional monogamous relationships are the correct or proper way to go about love. The term monogamy comes from the Greek term monos, meaning single, and gamos, meaning marriage, and was heavily influenced in the 1600s by the French term monogamia, which means the practice of marrying only once in a lifetime. Ironically, despite most relationships defining themselves as monogamous, statistics suggest that 50% of marriages end in divorce, and 70% of Western couples have experienced some kind of infidelity in their lives, which would suggest that our modern understanding of monogamy has perhaps strayed rather far from the original French interpretation. The societal expectation or mainstream representation of love is a linear one. You meet a partner, you date, you marry, and if you're lucky you die together. Congratulations, you've won at relationships. But anybody who's experienced dating in real life knows it is far from this simple. People fall out of love, we find feelings for other people, we reach disagreements where no compromise can be found, and in these cases the only alternative within monogamous relationships is to terminate and start afresh. Given the evidence that modern monogamous relationships have only a 50% chance of succeeding, with the other 50% resulting in divorce and a restart to the journey, surely it's a wonder that such a flawed and dysfunctional dynamic is still considered to be the norm. If you knew your marriage was 50% likely to fail, would you still take that gamble? And if so, why? Why is monogamy considered the norm? As you can probably imagine, giving a long and detailed history of human relationships and how the origin of monogamy came to be would take an awful long time, and so we're just going to try to keep it as brief as possible. If you'd like to have a full video detailing the vast history of monogamy amongst humans compared to other primates, then please feel free to let me know in the comments section below. Kit Opie, an evolutionary anthropologist from the University College London, suggests that the modern monogamous culture has only been around for just 1,000 years, although the initial route of maintaining a singular romantic connection could be the byproduct of human evolution as a social species stemming back to our independence from the other primates. Opie goes on to state that one of the current leading theories suggests that as agricultural society became prominent, marriage became a means of maintaining and preserving wealth, arguing that monogamy is a marriage system rather than a mating one. Arguably, the biggest influence on society's expectations regarding monogamy come from the power that religion holds over our expectations and beliefs. Many modern Western societies still loosely base their marital foundations on the Christian model of secular marriage, and although this model has certainly grown and become more accommodating and inclusive in recent decades, you can still see the influence of a time far less lenient. Marriages of the past were often transactional, a means of acquiring wealth or status, often disregarding the wants or needs of the individuals involved. Aspects of this are still present in the language we associate with weddings today. Giving away the bride, for example, being a sign of ownership or possession, the white wedding dress being a depiction of purity and virginity, or the fact that traditionally the father of the bride gives away his daughter to the groom. All of these aspects of modern traditional relationships reflect a time in which women were perceived very much as an object of possession, and many of these outdated and archaic aspects of monogamy are still unfortunately present in modern relationships too. So what is the alternative, and what reasons might we have to explore it? The term polyamory stems from the Greek word for many, and a Latin definition for love, simply translating to many loves. Although the specifics and parameters for each polyamorous relationship differs from dynamic to dynamic, most polyamorous relationships are founded on the basis that the participants are welcome to explore and express love freely without that expression causing strain to the relationship. In a forthcoming Perspectives in Psychology science paper, Terry Conley, a University of Michigan psychologist who's driven in the field, defines consensual non-monogamous relationships as a relational agreement in which partners agree that it's acceptable to have more than one sexual and/or romantic relationship at a time. This is distinguished from polygamy, which we'll address later on in the video. Polyamorous relationships tend to be far less linear than conventional relationships, likely because they're not limited by just two people. And while there are any number of relationship structures that can form from this freedom, polycouples tend to fall into one of several different relationship models. A bit of terminology that I'll likely use throughout this video is the term polycule, which is a word given to a connected network of people in a non-monogamous relationship, regardless of how many people are involved. There are far too many types of polyamorous relationship to list here, but I'll give a few examples of the most common kinds to develop. A V relationship, for example, is where one member is actively dating two partners at the same time, who are not directly or romantically involved with one another. A triad, or a throuple, is a relationship containing three members who are all equally involved, a quad being a four-person equivalent, and so on. A hierarchical relationship is one where there are two primary partners, whether that be a married couple or just a core relationship, and then any number of secondary partners as well. Although the secondary partners are still romantically invested in the relationship, the primary partners are given the priority when it comes to deciding the future of that relationship. Of course, these are only a select few of the seemingly endless kinds of polyamorous relationships, but they give you a vague idea of just how many potential polycules there are. It's all too easy to think of polyamory as the product of modern society's pressure on monogamy and the hedonistic expectations to enjoy life in the moment. But you may be surprised to hear that consensual non-monogamy has been around for far longer. Although by no means the same as polyamory, polygamy, which is the act of having more than one spouse, has been prominent throughout history and is present throughout numerous different ancient cultures. Although its manifestations within these cultures were often heavily weighted in the male favour and would often consist of one prominent male figure taking on several wives. Even by the time that civilization was founded in ancient Mesopotamia, polygamy was outlined and permitted for the purpose of procreation by the Hammurabi's Code, a strict set of laws that outlined how society should function. This very early form of polygamy was practiced throughout many ancient cultures, in Greece, Rome, China, Mongolia, and so on. In these early cases of polygamy, if a wife of a powerful or upper-class man could not offer children, then the man would take on a concubine, a lesser partner who was not seen as an equal to the spouse. Of course, these examples of historic polygamy are viewed as hugely misogynistic and stand as a testament to how far modern manifestations of non-monogamy have come. In fact, a 2016 study of two nationally representative samples of single Americans, 3,905 and 4,813 respondents respectively, found in each case that about 1 in 5 people had practiced polyamory during their lifetime. A 2016 YouGov poll found that 31% of women and 38% of men thought that their ideal relationship would be consensual non-monogamy in some form. Other research indicates that around 4 to 5% of Americans in relationships are in some form of consensual non-monogamy, be it swinging, where partners have sex with other people outside of their relationship, often other couples, at parties, an open relationship where it's cool to have sex with other people but not to grow emotionally attached to them, or polyamory where both partners approve of having close emotional, romantic and sexual relationships outside of the couple itself. People are curious too. From 2006 to 2015, Google searches for polyamory and open relationships went up massively. So what could be the reason for wanting a polyamorous lifestyle? For many people, it comes down to the way in which we perceive love, and our ability to comprehend being able to have feelings towards multiple people at once. For most monogamous relationships, both participants are in somewhat of an agreement to only feel towards one another. But of course, we all know that this is often not truly the case. We all have a capability to find attraction, attention, and passion in other people outside of our chosen relationship. And for a monogamous couple put in this predicament, the ultimatum comes down to whether that individual cheats and risks forfeiting their relationship, ignores their newfound feelings, or leaves in order to pursue the new love interest. The thing is, we are all capable of loving more than one person at a time. When you have your second child, for instance, you aren't expected to love each half as much. Neither are you expected to forfeit your love for one child in order to prioritise the other. Polyamory is no different. For polyamorous individuals, loving somebody is unique and distinct, but not exclusive. Polyamorous people believe that your love or connection to somebody doesn't have to diminish or adulterate your existing connections to somebody else, and that therefore you can have multiple distinct, unique, and genuine relationships without each interfering with one another. The next argument for polyamory is about compromise. We've all been in relationships where one or both participants have had to make sacrifices in order to make things work. Whether it be sacrificing aspects of your life that your partner doesn't appreciate or approve of, or committing to participating in activities that don't interest you for the sake of your partner's enjoyment. Of course, these compromises can be far deeper and more difficult, but we've come to believe that they are necessary because nobody is a perfect match, and therefore we should meet in the middle. While polyamorous individuals take that idea and run with it. Nobody's a perfect match, and it's fairly illogical to assume that any one individual can offer everything that their partner wants or needs, at least not without sacrificing some of their own desires in the process. Polyamorous individuals realise this and respond by accepting that they may not be able to offer everything their partner needs, but that's okay because their partner's other partners can perhaps make up for those differences. Instead of being forced to either compromise yourself for your partner's needs to be met, or your partner to compromise their desires in order to fit the parameters of what you're comfortable with, polyamorous individuals can get all of their needs met across a variety of relationships, whereby each individual is truly themselves without the expectation of sacrifice or compromise. Jealousy is the next point of interest when it comes to the differences between monogamy and polyamory. In a monogamous relationship, the people who have the potential to interest or distract your partner's attention are your competition. That attractive new assistant at your partner's work, that overly friendly waiter at the bar, that friend that gets just a little too close for comfort. Those probably innocent and uninterested individuals feel like competition, and that sense of threat creates jealousy and distrust. In polyamory, that is not the case, because all parties in the relationship have openly and honestly discussed and established boundaries, and all participants are on the same page. Now, that's not to say that jealousy doesn't exist within polyamorous relationships. In fact, it's a very natural response when first experiencing polyamory, and very few individuals escape that initial gnawing ping of jealousy in the early stages of a relationship. But once those feelings have been discussed and put to rest, they rarely have cause to create issue. The question is, are these themes consistent or purely anecdotal? Well, the paper for Polyamorous Next Door Inside Multiple Partner Relationships and Families found that polyamorous relationships had lower jealousy, higher trust, and higher sexual satisfaction with their partner or partners. Not only did polyamorous and non-monogamous relationships score higher for trust, lack of jealousy, and satisfaction, but also for commitment and perceived passion. Even when cross-examined with other non-monogamous individuals, polyamorists were found to be more satisfied than those that were in open relationships, likely due to the individuals not having to limit their emotional connections to the people that they'd established sexual relationships with. So what's responsible for this high level of satisfaction? One argument is that the overall standard for human response for relationships is habituation. This involves the loss of sexual attraction or excitement for your partner over time, as is evidenced by the statistics and experiences from marriage therapy. As time goes on, those urges between partners become less and less present, and these frustrations spill into other aspects of a relationship. Something that's worth taking into account is communication. Polyamorous relationships rely so heavily on communication and openness in order to establish boundaries and parameters, and maintain the degree of trust and honesty that's needed for this kind of relationship to function. And so issues are more likely to get discussed and resolved when they arise, rather than being neglected. For many monogamous relationships, issues or doubts are left to fester until they either reach a point of no return or the couple decides on therapy. But in relationships where communication is fundamental, these issues might not have the time to develop to that point of no return. Harvard sexologist Justin Miller argues that people who are erotophilic, which means they love sex, were often better fitted to consensual non-monogamy, but were no less committed to their relationships than those in monogamous dynamics. This would suggest that exclusivity and commitment are not one and the same. One of the biggest concerns people have when considering consensual non-monogamy is how that decision might impact their family dynamic. Of course, this will vary massively from relationship to relationship, but the study for Polyamorous Next Door Inside Multiple Partner Relationships and Families found there were no differences in relationship functionality between monogamous and non-monogamous dynamics. Sheff, one of the researchers who contributed to the findings of the paper, argues that non-monogamous relationships are often demonised and discredited over the perceived effect they might have on children growing up in that dynamic, whereas research actually indicates that kids who grow up in polyamorous families are no worse off than those who grow up in monogamous ones. Of course, there are difficulties associated with polyamory and all forms of consensual non-monogamy that are worth discussing. Amy Moores, a Purdue psychologist, found that those with higher avoidant attachment who struggle with intimacy have both positive feelings towards and a willingness to engage in polyamory, but were less likely to successfully participate in it. Subjectively, this makes sense, as those with avoidant attachment tend to appreciate both physical and emotional distance and time to themselves, so being actively involved with multiple partners might not cater to that particularly well. Equally, those with relational anxiety may struggle with polyamory due to the sensitivity to separation and being more prone to flares of jealousy, although of course these can occur in monogamous relationships as well. Of course, there are also an abundance of issues relating to the social stigma that surrounds polyamory or non-monogamy in general. This tends to vary in severity depending on the dynamic in question and the presenting genders of those who are participating. But due to the societal expectations of traditional femininity, women, especially those who have multiple male partners, tend to suffer the worst stigma. Of course, this is the product of society's apparent need to regiment and control what defines femininity, and the outdated but still present possessiveness people feel towards the expression of female sexuality. Male-presenting polyamorous people also face their fair share of backlash, often being portrayed as misogynistic and greedy, despite the fact that the dynamic they belong to caters to each individual's needs and desires equally. Unfortunately, these outdated stereotypes are still present throughout society, but as time goes on and polyamory becomes better represented in the mainstream, hopefully these stigmas will deteriorate. Now, this video has been something that has been very personal to me. I've been polyamorous for a long time, whether it was something I knew I was or not, and obviously this video has been a great way of me discussing it with people. I talk about it a lot on my Instagram. If you guys don't follow me, it's @mindbodyandsoul with underscores in between each word, but it's a subject that comes up fairly frequently. Of course, because I'm going off and filming porn for a living, like, my relationships have to have a degree of consensual non-monogamy there, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do my job. And it's only been the last few years that I've really come to terms and realised, like, this is what I am. I'm polyamorous. I have to have these connections with people. Obviously, with these videos, I try to be as objective as I can and outline the psychology and the science behind everything, but I keep getting requests to do a little bit of a personal talk at the end, where I talk about my own experiences with the subject. And so for me personally, I feel like polyamory is something that's so fundamental to a lot lot of people and they just don't realise it. So with my relationships in the past, I've always realised that I get very claustrophobic very quickly. I feel like I'm having to limit who I am as a person, having to limit how I interact with other people. And like, that's not to say that like my personality is particularly flirty or anything. It's just that like I enjoy being able to appreciate my connections with people without feeling like I have to limit them or inhibit them. And obviously when you're in a monogamous relationship, those kind of relationships and connections with other people are frowned upon. Even if it's just having a really close female friend, or other people's cases obviously a close friend of the gender that they're attracted to. But like in my case, for example, in the past I've been in a monogamous relationship and had really close female friends that obviously I have a really intimate relationship with as well. Not sexual, not romantic, but still intimate, and that's obviously caused issues. And so you tend to find yourself cutting off those friendships and those connections that otherwise you wouldn't have cut off at all. And so in those examples, it's like you're limiting how you interact with people and limiting who you are for the sake of a relationship, even though there's nothing there to worry about. And so it was those kind of thoughts that led me to kind of understanding, well, actually, like, I want to explore those experiences. I want to explore those connections. Why should I limit my ability to explore intimacy and love and passion for the sake of a relationship that is really just inhibiting me? And so it was one of those realizations that took time, and the more polyamorous people that I met, largely within the porn industry, but also outside of it, I guess, the more polyamorous people I met and the more I spoke to them about it, the more I realised actually, like, this ability to love more than one person, this ability to feel passion towards more than one person, this ability to feel intimacy towards more than one person, it's so fundamental, it's so important. And so yeah, that was my kind of journey into polyamory. It's an interesting subject because so many people come to me on Instagram, on Twitter, and ask how these relationships function, because they see obviously I'm off doing porn for a living, but I'm also in a relationship. And there's a lot of people that just can't comprehend quite how that works, and then you start talking about polyamory and they're like, whoa, so you don't just sleep with other people, you also date other people, you also talk to other people, you also have other intimacies with people. And it's like, once you start to understand that snowball effect, you start to realise actually there's way more to it than just sex. So I keep getting requests to do a video with my face in it rather than just using stock footage. Once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'll do a video just like that for you guys. As ever, if there's any subjects you want to see me cover in the future, drop them down in the comment section below, or feel free to DM me on Instagram at mindbodyandsoul with underscores between each word. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night.